The Sound That Breaks Through, a Ghost Movement essay. The sound of grief is not quiet, and this is often the first thing that unsettles people when it arrives. It is not the tears themselves, nor even the ache that settles into the chest, but the noise that forces its way out of the body with a force that feels disproportionate to intention. Many people expect grief to show itself as silence, as something contained and inward, perhaps even dignified. Instead, it often arrives as sobbing that breaks through the breath, fractures the voice, and bends the body forward without warning. It is raw, unshaped, exposed, and unmistakably human, and once it begins, it does not pause to ask whether the moment is suitable. For the person sobbing, there is often a sense of surprise at their own sound. The body produces something that does not resemble the self they recognize or present to the world. Breath comes in sharply and leaves in broken waves. The throat tightens and releases unpredictably, and the chest contracts as though pulled inward by gravity. The sound carries a texture that feels closer to something animal than articulate, and this alone can provoke embarrassment or shame, even in solitude. Yet the sound is not foreign. It is coming from a place beneath language, beneath control, from the part of the body that loved and has now been forced to register absence. Inside the body, sobbing is not experienced as emotion in isolation. It is physical strain and release at once. Muscles around the ribs ache as they contract repeatedly. The jaw tightens, trembles, then loosens again. The face pulls into shapes that feel involuntary, almost unrecognizable. The sound vibrates through the chest and skull, sometimes leaving the person lightheaded or exhausted once it subsides. The mind may try to keep pace, to explain or narrate what is happening, but the body does not wait for understanding. It moves according to a deeper rhythm, releasing what it has been holding because it can no longer do otherwise. This sound does not come from general sadness or even from extreme sorrow, however overwhelming those experiences can be. It does not come from disappointment, heartbreak, or pain alone. It comes from death, from the finality of someone no longer being alive, from the moment when the nervous system realizes that a presence which shaped daily life, expectation, memory, and rhythm is gone and will not return in physical form. Grief is not simply intensity of feeling. It is the body encountering permanence and struggling to recalibrate itself to a world that no longer matches the internal map it has been living by. Often, the sobbing does not arrive where it is expected. It may not come at the moment of death, nor during the funeral, nor during the early days when attention and structure are imposed from the outside. Instead, it arrives later, sometimes much later, in moments that appear ordinary or unguarded. The body might be washing dishes, driving along a familiar road, standing still in a place where the person once stood. A sound, a smell, or a simple absence can be enough. The breath catches, the chest tightens, and suddenly the sound breaks through whatever steadiness was in place moments before. When this happens, people often describe feeling overtaken, as though something has seized control of them. Yet this framing does not quite hold. The body is not losing control. It is releasing containment. It has held itself upright, organized itself around survival and function for as long as it believed necessary. When the sobbing comes, it is because the nervous system has judged that the release will not destroy it. The sound is not evidence of collapse, but of a calculated letting go, one that occurs only when the body senses it can endure the exposure. There is often fear within the sobbing itself. Fear of how loud it is, fear of how long it will last, fear that once it begins, it may not stop. The sound can feel bottomless, as though it might pull the person into something from which there is no return. This fear is not exaggerated. Grief opens onto depth that modern life rarely acknowledges. It reveals how dependent our sense of stability is on the presence of others, and how thin the structures are that hold us together once that presence is removed. The sound exposes this truth without softening it. Alongside the fear, There can also be a form of relief, though it rarely feels comforting. It is the relief of no longer managing, no longer translating pain into acceptable shapes, no longer holding the body rigid against its own knowing. The sound speaks from the place where attachment lived. It does not ask to be interpreted. It simply declares that something essential has been lost and that the body will not pretend otherwise. Hearing sobbing in another person carries a different weight entirely. It cuts through rooms and conversations, interrupting whatever order was in place. The listener's body responds before thought has time to intervene. The chest tightens, the stomach drops, the breath becomes shallow or irregular. There is an immediate recognition that something serious is happening, something that cannot be solved by words. This response is not social discomfort alone. It is visceral, rooted in a part of the body that understands loss without needing context. The sound of another person's grief bypasses politeness and training. It carries enough information on its own. Even without knowing who has died, the listener knows that a bond has been broken, that something irreplaceable has been removed. The person sobbing is exposed in a way that resists reassurance. Witnessing this can produce a strong urge to intervene, to quiet the sound, to offer comfort, explanation, or distraction. Often, this urge arises not from the needs of the grieving person, but from the listener's own difficulty staying present with what the sound awakens in them. Grief heard out loud reminds others of their own attachments, their own vulnerabilities, and the certainty that loss will one day touch them too. The sound does not allow distance. It reaches into the listener's body and stirs memories, fears, and ungrieved absences that may have been held quietly for years. This is why people sometimes feel helpless, overwhelmed, or even irritated in the presence of sobbing. The sound does not only express grief, it reveals it as a shared human condition. There is also something deeply familiar about this sound, something that feels older than individual experience. Long before grief was discussed, managed, or ritualized, human beings cried out when their dead were taken from them. The sound of grief predates structured language. It is woven into the body as a response to rupture that threatens not only individual attachment, but the fabric of communal life. When we hear it, something ancient recognizes it, not as a personal failure, but as a signal that love has been severed. This recognition becomes even stronger when sobbing shifts into a grief scream. This sound does not arrive gradually, it erupts. It is pulled from a depth that feels almost violent in its force, carrying shock, protest, disbelief, and devastation all at once. It is not directed outward in anger, nor upward in appeal. It is the body reaching a limit, meeting the reality of death without buffer or preparation. The scream is not constant, but when it comes, it leaves an imprint on everyone who hears it. Witnessing that sound can be deeply unsettling. It reveals the edge of what a human body can carry. People may freeze, cry themselves, or feel an overwhelming urge to escape the space. This reaction is not a judgment on the sound. It is a recognition of how close it brings us to something we cannot control or contain. The scream strips away the illusion that grief can always be borne quietly, or that love can be lost without cost. For the person who screams, there is often little awareness of the sound as it happens. The body expels it, and only afterwards does self-consciousness return. Shame, confusion, or apology may follow. Many people feel compelled to explain themselves, to justify the noise, to reassure others that they are all right. But the scream is not a mistake. It marks the moment when the weight crossed from bearable into unbearable, even if only briefly. It is the body naming that threshold in the only language available to it. Grief does not move according to a clear progression. It does not travel neatly from intensity to calm, nor does it resolve once the sound has been released. Some days the body functions with relative steadiness. Other days the sobbing returns without warning. This movement is not instability. It is the nervous system learning how to carry love and absence together, adjusting repeatedly to a reality that cannot be fully integrated. Some people do not sob at all, at least not at first. Their grief may show itself as numbness, exhaustion, or a dull pressure that never fully lifts. This does not indicate a lack of depth or connection. It reflects a body that has learned to survive through containment. Even then, the sound often arrives eventually, months or years later, triggered by something small and unremarkable. When it does, it carries the same force, because grief does not diminish simply because it has been quiet. What can be learned here is not a technique, but a form of recognition. The body already knows how to grieve. It knows when to hold and when to release. The sound is part of that knowledge. Understanding this does not require intervention, only listening. When the sound is allowed to exist without being interrupted by judgment or urgency, something shifts. Not toward resolution or meaning, but toward acknowledgement. The grief is no longer isolated inside the body. It has been placed, briefly, into the world. Grief does not end. It changes shape, but it remains present as long as love remains real. The dead do not disappear from the body. They persist in habit, memory, posture, and reflex, in the ways the nervous system was shaped by their presence. The sound that breaks through is one of the ways this ongoing bond makes itself known. There is no need to soften this sound or to elevate it into something noble or instructive. It is already sufficient as it is, human, ancient, precise. The sound of grief is not weakness, nor failure, nor excess. It is the body remembering what mattered and refusing to allow that memory to fade quietly beneath the surface of daily life. When the sound comes, whether as sobbing or as scream, it is telling the truth. It is saying that love existed here, that it left a mark, and that mark cannot be erased without doing violence to the body itself. Allowing the sound to speak is not indulgence, it is honesty. And even when the sound settles back into silence, it does not vanish. It returns to breath, to posture, to rhythm, waiting for the next moment it needs to be heard. Grief does not ask to be resolved. It asks to be recognized. The sound that breaks through is not asking for an answer. It is asking to exist, because in that existence the bond is honoured and the dead are not forgotten.